Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host Jacob Shorba, and we have got some breaking news today as quarterback Trevor Lawrence will be officially hitting the IR due to the concussion he suffered this Sunday against the Texans. I also think some of the reasoning probably comes down to the AC joint injury, but nevertheless, it is very unlikely we see him play again this year. You know, this will be a 4-week thing at bare minimum. At that point, you have one game left against. Gosh, who do they play the last week? It's against the Indianapolis Colts on the road. At that point, he's not coming back for that game. It's going to be over. Team's eliminated from the playoffs, right? So, first and foremost, this is the right decision by the team. I respect the process of how they got here. Well, I uploaded a video last week talking about how I would have liked them to just get it over with before the game. At the same time, while I disagree that we did it a week later, nothing really came of it because of the AC joint injury, and it was a completely different thing. It's unfortunate, right? But I'm not going to sit here and blame the coaching staff or the owner, the GM for the hit that took place. That's not their fault, right? He wasn't that extra risk for that kind of injury because of the AC joint injury. So just want to get that pretty clear. But we're just going to talk for a moment about, how did the season go for Trevor? How do we feel about his performance in the first year of, well, let's say this. It's not the first year of the contract extension, but it's the first year after the contract extension. So, we got one more year where he's not going to be on that contract, even though cap hits will come up. Next year is what would have been the fifth year option. And then after that, that's when you really need him to start playing up to that level. And obviously, you just prefer it happened yesterday, but it is what it is. Talking about his performance, though, this year, it was a very interesting year because you have what was ultimately a very rough start and a lot of big questions around him and, around this whole team, to be fair. It felt like this team had a lot of issues at the start of the year, losing pretty much every game in every way you could imagine. Lawrence wasn't playing well. His completion percentages, you look at this, I mean, it's a vast difference between weeks 1 through 4 compared to, I guess 5 through 8, right? He was very inaccurate, and even when you look at the adjusted completion percentage, he was down like 6 or 8 points compared to 2021. So it was a really bad start to the year. Didn't play well. You didn't see a lot of big games. And then after that, he finally started to get things going. He's got that bounce back game against the Colts at home. It always seems like that goes really well for this team. You saw it with Lawrence. You saw it with Trayvon Walker. You saw it with, a lot of other players on this team. Ezra Cleveland wasn't there, one who really broke out in that game. And then, from that point on, solid play, right? Not a whole lot of really terrible games. And then you get to these last couple, right? Philadelphia, not a great performance. 2 interceptions, although I think one of those was a Travis Etienne bobble. I can't remember what the other one was. You see it, 1 turnover worthy play, 2 interceptions. So not a great performance, and then didn't really play a ton against Houston. But let's be fair, and say what it was. Well, he was on the field. He was struggling. It was not a good game. He was very inaccurate. He was missing easy throws. He overthrew Brian Thomas Jr. deep. Threw a pick. I think it was Derek. I can't remember who it was. If it was Derek Stingley or someone else, but he wasn't playing well before the injury, and I think he would have probably improved as the game went on. He hadn't played for a little bit at that point, but to summarize all this, right? It was a very up and down season, and there's a lot of reasons for that. There's things that you can be frustrated with him about. There's things you should be frustrated with the coaching staff about, and things that are going to change in the future for the better, you hope. It really depends on who the head coach is that comes in, and I think ideally you want an offensive mind. You need someone who's going to bring in something innovative, something that's going to work, something that can be creative, but in a smart way, where it's not just these ridiculous plays that we don't have the personnel for. You hope that this team is able to bring in a general manager that can build around him. And you've seen some pieces come in, right? We're not going to sit here and say that every single move that Trent Baalke did was bad, right? Like, he brought in Christian Kirk. He's been a really good player for 3 years. I don't know if he's around after this year. I think if he is, it's definitely going to be less of a payment to him because I don't think he can really command that 18 million after having two season-ending injuries. And then Brian Thomas Jr., great draft pick. Evan Ingram, really good signing, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And Travis Etienne's been pretty good, for a couple of these years. And obviously they've struggled more this year, but it's a lot to do with the infrastructure, right? The offensive line, the blocking scheme. How does this team perform for that player? So yeah, it's unfortunate, that there isn't more done because there's more that needs to be done than that. And these players were not all here and all playing well at the same time. And that's going to have to be a priority in this offseason. To me, like, I look at this roster, I see a lot of pieces that you can overhaul on the offense. And when I look at the defense, I just don't think it's going to come down to as much of changing players around, especially with a lot of these 3-year, 2-year guaranteed contracts that were signed this last year. I think a lot of it's going to come down to coaching. Getting someone who's going to play better, who's going to coach better for the players on that side of the ball while trying to add to the infrastructure on offense. You got to make the decisions. Parker Washington going to be the future slot receiver. Are you comfortable with that? I think I would be. Doesn't mean I don't think you could do better, right? But Parker Washington has been a great draft pick. He's played pretty well, just has best career game. I think he's going to get better. BTJ, he's an awesome receiver. He's going to be a player who just gets better and better from this point. And then you need someone else, right? I know they got Gabe Davis. He didn't do anything this year, unfortunately, and he got hurt. And so it's kind of a crappy situation there where you almost have to ignore that you have him on the team. Plus, you're probably going to get Travis Hunter in the offseason, so he's going to have to take the field. That's going to do a lot. I think the run game, you're probably going to have to consider moving on from ETN if you don't see improvement because the way he's playing right now just hasn't been that great. And I'll probably go back and watch film in all fairness to make sure, like, this isn't just an offensive line problem at this point, but it hasn't been a good year for him. But you got Tank Bigsby, you got to build around that. And this offensive line, I just think, you look at it now, after the Walker Little extension, it kind of limits what you can do. And, well, I'm glad for Walker Little he got the extension. I wish they would have waited so that the next person coming in could decide if that was going to be okay with them, because this kind of limits your options for how you improve things. I think they're going to ultimately have to try to find a long-term center and a long-term right guard that can be great for this team. And there's going to be options, right? There's going to be players out there that you could go get, and you have the draft picks for it. Throw out a couple names. Tyler Booker would be a phenomenal pick for this team, and now that you got the tackle in Walker Little, you might be able to get him in the early second round or trade up from 33, assuming they have the first overall pick. But getting away from draft talk for a moment, they have to do more around Trevor Lawrence. That's the point I'm trying to make. At the same time, there are statistics that we have here that are not good regarding Trevor Lawrence. And these are things that he controls, right? This can take out what really the surroundings are. It doesn't take out as much coaching, but we are through 4 years, right? This is no longer a player who should be developmental. This is no longer a player that we really shouldn't know what he is. We should know who Trevor Lawrence is by now. And unfortunately, while you had the exciting end to 2022, it's been a lot of unknowns since then. It's been a lot of up, a lot of down, and a lot of back and forth. And unfortunately, it didn't end on a good note this year. So, talking about all that, it's going to be a coaching thing. I think this team just needs to figure that out. They need to add infrastructure, but ultimately, coaching is going to be the biggest thing for Lawrence because it's kind of scary to think about. But if you get it wrong one more time, what's that going to do for this team? It's got to be considered. Now, for the rest of the year, we're going to be stuck with Mac Jones. I hope the best for him. I think this is a great opportunity for him. He's coming off his best game against Houston. threw for almost double the yards that he's thrown for the rest of, well, I guess in each individual game the rest of the year, almost more than he's thrown with the rest of the year. But good performance. Finally threw his first passing touchdown. But you want to see more of that from him. I think he could be a player that maybe gets a shot somewhere next year, but he's got an uphill battle for that. Otherwise, he might return. He might be a guy that they say, you know what, we'll bring you back as a backup. The market's not really there for you to be a starter. Maybe you get another opportunity if something happens. God forbid, of course. But that might be the way things go. But for Mac Jones, we're gonna have to see a lot of him. He's gonna have to really step up his game if they want to win. I don't think they do though, to be fair. But this coaching staff, I'm sure, does to save their necks. But he is kind of the perfect person to sort of lead this thing for the rest of the year. Give him an opportunity, try to prove himself for another team in the future, and you're also probably not going to have a good enough team to win another game this year. Although, you look at that schedule, it's questionable. So, hey, that's all I got for today. It's a very unfortunate situation. This all went down this way this whole season. Talked about it a bunch, but hey, we're getting closer to the end. Don't got to worry about Lawrence getting a terrible injury anymore or something else happening. Shut down, let him get healthy, let him get ready for training camp and all those off-season things. But yeah, we can only hope for better, and we'll be here for all of it. Want to shout out our channel members: Premier Seer 904, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, and Brian Foster. I appreciate y'all supporting me, and everyone else who watches these videos and comments. Make sure to let me know your thoughts, and with that said, go Jags.